In today's episode of the Platform Presents podcast, we got a very interesting guest here with today. We're with Vinay Chaudhri, and he's sailing over from the folks over at Backed. And as the website says, they've got your back. And basically, they're following basically their human-centric principles in investment and look into founders over markets, basically. And they're checking for them, basically, because the founders are the company's most important asset. So we want to really deep dive into what the team at Backed is looking into. And how they're looking at the market at the moment. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Lucas.
Yeah, so maybe give people a little bit of a background on Backed. Like, what is it all about, and what types of businesses are you invested in?
Sure. So we're an early stage venture capital fund. We mainly invest in high growth technology companies. We're a young company. We started in 2015-16, and the team itself is a young team, and that really comes through in our dynamic and contrarian way of seeing the market and seeing venture overall. In terms of investment areas specifically, over the last 7-8 years, we've developed greater competencies, through working with founders and through understanding the markets, and building clusters in the following areas. So one is Web3 or crypto, blockchain. The other one is biotech. And the last one is fintech. And then at the end, we are still a generalist seed fund, and we still do place generalist investments in across a whole bunch of sectors, whether it's Industry 4.0 or consumer or food. But we're, I think, over time, really focusing on the first three areas.
Very cool. Now, maybe tell us a little bit more about how you guys are coming across great opportunities. Like, what's sort of, your mechanism? You mentioned actually early stage is sort of the expertise or the focus. Maybe tell us a little bit about, where you're finding great companies. And from there, we can probably move into, what makes a great founders team for you and a great startup.
Yeah, sure. There's multiple pathways into deal flow, as we call it. The reality is that understanding whether something is a good investment is an extremely complex decision. And both for the founder to choose which investors they should work with, but vice versa for the investor to understand the founder, particularly in early stage where there really isn't a lot of metrics, right? We are essentially making a bet based on whether we believe this person has the right qualities for this market, so founder market fit, and whether the market has the right upside. Is it a large enough market? Is this disruption or innovation sufficiently interesting and well thought through? And does this person or the team have what it takes to build and scale it? And of course, a lot of ventures don't succeed. And therefore, how you find these people also can be very complicated. And in reality, so much of it is dependent on the existing venture tech ecosystem. So, the reality is a lot of cold inbound just isn't right. And yet there are sources, in the form of individuals, in the form of institutions or programs, which a lot of VCs, including us, look to as signals of de-risking a founder and their business. So, companies, I'll give some examples, companies that come through particular angels who are really much closer to the front lines, talking to a lot more founders, understanding a lot more what's happening at the cutting edge of a sector, will always outweigh someone coming in cold just by virtue of this person who we trust already having spent time with founders. So that's like a warm introduction. There are certain demo days which have proven at least to be within VC in vogue in terms of de-risking a business. Y Combinator, Entrepreneur First, Station. Now, that's not to say necessarily that these are guarantees of success. There's plenty of YC and EF companies that don't go anywhere, but there are plenty of companies all around Europe and the world that don't go anywhere. So that's number two. And number three, increasingly, Twitter and certain online communities are really where a lot of founders spend a lot of time, particularly in the Web3 space. And those dialogues and those conversations can lead to relationships with people who are often founders themselves, who see a lot of stuff. The last one is the founders in our portfolio now. So now we have kind of somewhere close to 75 companies across the back portfolio. And for example, we're finding in bio that these are the founders who are building companies at various stages, and they really know what's going on in the market as well. And so we see recommendations coming from them holding a lot of value, because not only are they experts in their field and they're trusted by other founders, but they're just having a lot of conversations about what's going on in those communities on the ground.
Very cool.
So what's interesting about being here on this podcast is cold inbound is actually, I think, quite difficult for us to discern. And I think a lot of venture funds, while they leave those pipes open and do their best to try and qualify those leads in terms of through forms, asking you what stage you are, what sector you're in, what ticket size you want, what's the size of the market you're going into, can you share us your deck, can you share us a little video of yourself, like trying to find ways to understand what is the quality of this investment proposal. Invariably, by the time you're at seed, you've already probably gone through a friends and family round or an angel round or a syndicate round or a token raise or whatever else it might be. And other people will have witnessed what you're about and have a sense of where you're at. And seed is already, it's all part of a pipeline. So we're at the early stage of a pipeline, but not the earliest stage. And we're looking at signals from someone earlier to help us make sense of what's happening where we are now. Now, all of that is convention, but the reality is that huge outsized venture wins don't necessarily come from convention. They can come from the outliers. And so, of course, you do have to look at what you're getting in terms of your cold inbound, what you're getting in terms of a founder that just pops up in your inbox and somehow has found you and is laying the case out, because you never know that this one, adjacent, unconventional, non-qualified opportunity might be exactly the one that returns the fund and more.
Very good. Super interesting. Now, since obviously we have a lot of sort of inbound marketers actually on the show as well, what I'm curious is just to get a bit of a perception of what does actually the website back.vc, like what role would it play for the fund? Like, of course, it doesn't play the same role like a product page, but like, how do you guys think about it?
For sure. And this is something that we've been on an evolution with. Ultimately, any business that's a portfolio business, venture or agency or studio, the website is helping you de-risk yourself in the face of a potential customer, in our case, an exceptional early stage founder. And what they're looking to understand is, who have we backed in the past? Which companies do our investors sit on the board of, and who have we backed in the past? Because they're trying to de-risk us, because every investor is also trying to tell founders why they're the right investor, right? So it's this dance where everyone is trying to figure out, who is full of hot air, to put it politely, and who is the real deal, and trying to figure that out. And so our website is a way of demonstrating our ethos, which actually, in all honesty, doesn't receive that many visits. But the pages that receive the most visits are who are the investors and what companies have we backed. And so I'm probably going to undertake a website revision process in the near future, optimizing against the data I now have from having redesigned the website 3 years ago and watching which pathways people go down. But yeah, that's really what they want. They want to understand, for example, you're a biotech founder. Someone told you over dinner, hey, you should really speak to BACT. They're a smart bunch of people. And let me see what this BACT is about. And you go on the website. You need to at least go on there and see a bunch of biotech companies, and companies, hopefully, that are aspirational for you and you want to get to where they want to get to. So you can assume, which could be a dangerous assumption, but you can assume that this fund had something, at least knows how to spot winners or had something to do with these companies' successes. But the smartest founders, they're wise enough to know that they won't just take what's on a shop window for granted, and they'll go around the back, they'll go on Crunchbase, they'll see who you're connected with on LinkedIn, who you're in conversation with on Twitter. They'll ask other founders about you, and they're really, they'll be really careful, because as we say on our own website, an investor is for life. It can be an incredible relationship, but it can also be a very complicated one and a bad one. And all the mythologies around investors in the founder world, they all start from relatively true places, sadly. So yeah, but the short answer is the website is essentially a way of de-risking us. And the strongest way we can de-risk ourselves is by showing who are the companies we backed early. We were one of the first businesses as a venture fund in Europe to really take biotech seriously. And we now have one of biotech's strongest clusters. And to be able to demonstrate to founders that you got into bio back in 2017, before most of Europe even knew what it was, shows a real ability to take contrarian bets. And that's what founders are looking for, because at seed, it's in huge part still about belief. Yeah.
Very good. As we slowly getting to the end of the recording, I would have some rapid fire questions to wrap it up. Are you ready for those?
Sure, let's do it.
What is the last book you read?
The last book I read? Jerry Reboot.
Mm-hmm. What's one single thing that Backed is focused on the most at the moment?
Institutionalizing the fund.
Mm-hmm. If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you would fix for your role today?
Ooh. Focus.
And if today would be your very first day joining Backed, what's the one advice you would give yourself for the journey?
Ask all the dumb questions.
Very cool. Vinny, I really appreciate you took the time with us today to really deep dive into what Backed is all about. I want to give you the very last word. If people and founders or marketers who are listening in would be forgetting all that we discussed, what's the one single thing they should remember about Backed?
That we're the VC fund you want to work with in Europe.
Very good. Thanks a lot for being a guest on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Lucas.